Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Brandon, your trusted realtor, and I'm coming to you with another amazing episode. Today, we're going to spend time talking about something I am all too familiar with because for many of you, if you don't know, is how I got, in part, my start in mortgage finance. And today we're going to spend some time talking to you about foreclosure and what that looks like and what it really is. Foreclosure is the process of legally forfeiting your property due to the lack or the absence of making payments. I always find to be foreclosure very, very interesting. I spent about 9 or maybe 10 years just directly on the phone talking to individuals, doing case management, assessments, modification plans, name it, you could think of it, talking to lenders, negotiating plans, and all for free because it was my job to do this negotiation. And I found that all too much, not only did I become desensitized to the whole process of foreclosure, but I had to listen to people's, the most important part for me that I found of the foreclosure process was having that conversation and finding out what the RFD was, what the reason for default is. And the reason for default is infinitely important. The reason for default tells us what is the situation, the circumstance that brought you to this place. And if you're currently one of those people who are sitting in a place of foreclosure, the biggest thing you're dealing with is very much the same thing that you dealt with when you first decided to buy a home, which is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of not knowing, fear of making a phone call and then committing yourself to something or another. What I can guarantee you is that everything is happening in the background. The same way when you bought the house, you just knew that you showed up, you said you like a house. For most of you, I'm finding when I talk to some people, they've had some really colorful experiences with real estate agents, but that's video for another day. And so it's just very much like that. Like it should have been pretty much seamless, but in the background, everybody else is hustling and bustling to make sure the transaction comes together and it's pulled off seamlessly. In the foreclosure process, the same thing is happening. Whether you want to pick up that phone, you want to have the discussion, it is happening. So in the first 30 days, you get notifications that say, hey, you're in default, or you're starting in the default process, and that gets reported to the credit bureau. 60 days after that, you begin or you're in pretty much the pre-foreclosure stage. 60 days being the number of days since you missed a payment. And then after that 90-day period, and this is typically true, 90 days and greater for most lenders, is when they begin to file for foreclosure or eviction. Remember when you first bought the home, and many people forget, and that's why I always tell my clients, take the mortgage documents and put them in your bedroom closet, and at night when you just really need to get to sleep, pull those things out and read them. But you need to remember to always keep those documents, but you signed a mortgage agreement or a deed of trust. And what you essentially agreed to is that you were going to buy a mortgage, and the asset for that mortgage is the house. And so two things normally happen is that people go into the transaction from a real estate standpoint and you say, I own this house. This is my house. Yes, you own the mortgage on the house. You have to pay it off. And that means that just that you have to make the payments. And when an individual finds that they're in foreclosure, they have done exactly, they are in violation of the terms of the mortgage deed of trust. And so for the month of September, we found that there were 10,289 U.S. properties that started the foreclosure process. That's up 106% from a year ago. And lenders completed the foreclosure process on over 2,600 U.S. properties in September of this year. And that's up 8% from the previous month and up 33% from a year ago. So it gives you a sense of what the trend is. And this is really nothing that we should be. This is all something that really people in the mortgage industry all predicted, that there were going to be a number of people who are just not going to be able to recover from COVID, who are not going to find suitable or reasonable employment, and just were not going to be able to cover the delta between unemployment, given the time frame, and buying a home. And many people don't realize it, or some people will be watching this and they're like, oh, you're in foreclosure, why don't you just pay it off? Well, it's always not as easy and as simple, especially from a psychology standpoint, from my personal perspective, when people begin to see that they are 10 or 15 or $20,000 behind in their mortgage payment. And when they begin to see that number, many people are defeated. On top of the fact that you have to think that other life expenses are continuing. So especially most individuals, if they have have children, then and they have daycare costs or those associated costs, they're probably like a duck on water. They're on top, they look like everything's going well, but underneath the water, they're paddling like the Dickens to stay afloat. And that also means that they're, as we would say in the South, perpetrating a fraud until, or faking it till they make it, because that's just the game that people have to play in order to basically survive. And that's unfortunate because that's the culture that we live in. So one of the things to take into consideration when it comes to foreclosure or being in foreclosure is that you have options. As a homeowner and being someone invested in your property, you have significant options. Now, I'm going to say the option that I consider to be the most reasonable or realistic option for last, and it'll be for obvious reasons. But if you're a person who is looking down the pipeline of foreclosure, then remember that you have the options to engage in a repayment plan. The name of the game is communication. You have to have a conversation with your mortgage lender and talk to them about your situation and what you're dealing with in order for them to be able and available to assist you with your needs. A repayment plan means that every month you're going to be paying just a little bit more. The agreement will be that you pay a little bit more than your existing mortgage payment to your lender until your indebtedness is paid down. Typically, your lender will have a certain metric by which they want to get paid. So the payment plans will typically not extend beyond 3 or 6 months. And all of this is really dependent on the lender. So I also advise individuals, when you are in foreclosure, don't project. Try to avoid projecting, because whatever it is in your life that caused you to be in foreclosure is awful, and we can all understand and sympathize and empathize with that. But sometimes the person on the other end of the call feels that they are maybe not as empathetic because they are only looking at this as a transaction or looking at the property as an asset. So one of the important things is also not only to communicate, but also to try as much as possible to remove the emotion from the transaction. Communicate the facts. Focus on what the situation is and how you can remediate it. The situation is, I'm delinquent in my payments by X numbers of dollars. What is the best strategy for me to remediate this so that I can stay in my home? So a repayment plan would be just that. Your mortgage payment is $2,000, so you're paying $2,500, an extra $500 to catch up whatever arrearage or money that is left over or delinquent. The next is a loan modification. Many people think about a loan modification as where the money just disappears and they just put the money on the back end, which is essentially what they do. Is that it's a type of novation, which is the creation of a new loan. So when you have a loan modification, you're getting a new loan created. They are basically terminating your existing loan, paying that off, and then creating a new loan with and including the delinquent balance into the arrearage. They also use the same kind of process or approach for individuals with this, I think it was with PPP, or individuals who are behind in their mortgage. They allow them to defer payment on their mortgage during COVID as one of the bills in order to allow people to pay that a little bit later to spread out that payment. Now, note that that also shows on your credit report and on payment. So if I had a situation where a client or customer in this case took advantage of that loan product and unscrupulously, in my opinion, and I don't usually cast judgments, but took advantage of the program, pocketed the money that because the property was being rented, so there was cash flow in the property, but pocketed that money, and then when attempted to rent somebody else's property, and of course, this all kind of just fell into my lap, and once I figured out what it was one of those situations where it was like, I was being asked by the customer at that time, just explain it away and just tell them that it's no big deal, it's current now. I was just like, this is... So anyway, so that's not the intended purpose, but people will abuse any system. So that's essentially what was previously used in that law or amendment, a loan modification situation. You have to talk to your lender, and of course, a loan modification has to be approved. You should never strategically default, which is what that situation is, in order to take advantage of a loan modification. A strategic default doesn't look good for you because it also shows on your credit. So if you're in a situation where you already have maybe a high payment and you strategically default, then all that money is being rewrapped. If interest rates are higher, then you're going to be, if you have a low interest rate now, you're giving a new and higher interest rate, that means your payment goes up. So there's a whole lot of variables that exist within the mortgage arena, and this becomes a very dangerous game for those individuals that feel like they want to try to play the system. The best course of action is when you see the handwriting on the wall, maybe to get a standard refinance, especially if you still have active employment or you know in advance that you're going to be unemployed, so that way you can refinance your property. I think we should all be proactive in doing this and refinancing our homes and taking advantage of lower interest rates, so that way we can ultimately bring down our monthly mortgage payment anyways. And that'll do two things. One, even if in the short term it just brings down your payment, in the long term, let's assume that you're not in default, your asset now is cheaper. And so when you rent that asset out, let's say you were able to get your monthly mortgage payment down to $1,600 to $1,700 through a series of refinancing, and you might be able to rent it out for $2,200 or $2,400. That's cash flowing. You're cash flowing all of that money, which, I mean, you should put some away responsibly, of course, to protect your asset. You'll need a new roof. Maybe the pipes might burst, so you want to have money to protect the asset while the renter is there. But do you kind of get what I'm saying? Like, it's all a game, and it's all about strategery. And so that's why I said the whole foreclosure avoidance, about when you are in that place, it's about what are the tools that are available to me based on my current situation. And that in parts, quite honestly, depends on the dollar amount with regard to your income. The next option is related to liquidating the property. Now, when we get to the place of liquidating the property, these next two options are going to be for situations or individuals who have just ultimately, and I feel, again, if you remember early on in this video, you're still sticking around, there's going to be individuals I think most individuals are emotionally attached to their home. They feel like it is my home or it's their first home, and they just feel like they have no reason and no desire, and considering leaving their home is out of the question. So these next options are dealing with liquidating the property, but they do have an adverse impact on individuals that choose or end up finding themselves in this situation. The first is a short sale. Now, you probably heard about a short sale because I have many clients who will come to me and say, can you find me a short sale property? Getting your 5 mil property in foreclosure. And I'm like, that's not exactly how things work. So short sale properties are typically will take significantly longer than your standard mortgage or real estate transaction to close. A short sale process has to be approved, or a short sale property has to be approved by the lender. So think about what I described in the beginning. The person has already gone down about 90 days of delinquency, more than likely 120 days, sometimes 180. Now the lender's gotten to a place where they said, hey, in between that, 90 and 180 days, the lender is given permission for that individual who owns that property to sell that home and sell it for a loss or less than the market value or market price of the property, so that way that individual can then pay off the mortgage and potentially walk away. But one of the things that also happens is you get a short sale negotiator. The short sale negotiator can cost about $10,000, and then it's listed with a real estate agent, a real estate broker who specializes in foreclosed properties. I have a specialty or a certification in REO properties with the National Association of Realtors, and so went through the class, got the certification, what have you. Also, it's been historically my background. I've done this for such a huge amount of my life with regards to helping people understand and navigate this process. So once the lender finds that and they get their opinion, they have to do a calculation. But the lender can take as much time as they need to really get that calculation. And once they have an offer, that offer has to then be approved by the lender. Do you see where we're going? A short sale can take 120 days. I actually was bidding. I was going to flip a house here. I think it was in Temple Hills. And I was under contract for the short sale for 7 months, 6 months. Then they end up coming back asking for $15,000 more, and I was just like, that's just unreasonable. And we ended up not going forward with that transaction. So the next option that's available to you is a deed in lieu. And the deed in lieu basically says that you say, okay, I'm going to walk away from the property. I'm going to give you the deed in lieu of you taking my property foreclosure. Again, there has to be an application that you fill out with the lender, and then the lender has to make the determination on whether or not this is something that they're willing to accept. The next and final option that I would recommend for you is just sell your home before it gets too bad. we all come to a place of realization in this process, and this is kind of the ugly part of foreclosures, that sometimes we have to realize to say when we got to know when to fold them, and we got to know when to hold them. And in cases where you have potentially lost your home and you have to downsize, many people will say, well, where am I going to go? What am I going to do with my things? That is unfortunately part of the process that you will have to navigate. But it is worse to be foreclosed on and trying to navigate that process with no money than selling your home before you know it's going to get that bad, taking whatever equity you paid, because essentially you have to remember that your home is your own personal forced savings. You for all the years that you're in your home, you are saving this money. So by putting your emotions ahead of, quite honestly, business acumen, and just saying, what is the reasonable thing to do here? It is day one and I just got notified that I'm going to be unemployed. Okay. How long? I'm maybe 6 months into it and I'm exhausting my savings. I'm realizing I cannot continue. I can't find a job. I don't have employment. Now is the time for me to say, okay, do I continue to persist under the hope, guys, and auspices that I'll find something and then be able to recover things? Or do I just move forward with selling my home, knowing that I've been here 10 or 12 years, but I can take the $200,000 and I can downsize my life to something that's more affordable, a smaller, and purchase a condo? Maybe it's not in the area that I want to be, but you're able to navigate life. And so I'm a firm believer of making the decision that is in the best interest, that is in your best interest, excuse me. But it's also important that you understand the reason that you have your home. And your home is an asset and it should be used in that capacity. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where unfortunately you can't pay, then it is, in my personal opinion, more advantageous to take your money and run. I don't think that's any different from being at a casino and then winning $1,000 or $2,000 and you only put $40 into it. I would say take your money and run. You've won the day. So for the month of September, when it relates to foreclosure activity and things to take away, what I will leave you with is that nationwide in September of 21, one in every 7,000 properties had a foreclosure filing. States with the highest foreclosure rates in September included Florida. One in every 3,200 housing units had a foreclosure filing. Illinois, one in every 3,500 housing units had a foreclosure filing. And Delaware, one in every 3,800 housing units had a foreclosure filing. In Nevada, one in every 4,000 housing units had a foreclosure filing. And in New Jersey, one in every 4,400 housing units had a foreclosure filing. 10,289 U.S. properties started the foreclosure process in September. Again, that's up 23% from the previous month and up 106% from a year ago. So lenders do, and they continue to expect that this trend will persist into 2020, or that trend will persist into 2022. So it's important that regardless of what your current situation is, that you are armed with the knowledge that you need, so that way you can think about the process strategically and with your best interest in mind. Because again, the name of the game is building wealth, and we all need to have a process in place in the event that somewhere along the line the ball gets fumbled. So my name is Brandon. I am your trusted realtor. I look forward to being your source and your resource for all of your real estate needs. Take care and talk to you soon.